Honored with being the first seminar of your Repeal Day conference. So, you know, I love that, obviously, French brandy is kind of, it's an item or a category that's starting to grow, and I have to thank all of those folks in Bourbon County for bringing the American consumer out of white spirits and into something with just a little bit of color. So we're going to kind of cover in a quick synopsis here the three categories of French brandy, being Cognac, Armagnac, and Calvados. With that, I just want you to know, I really kind of detest specific tastings. I don't want you to have to think that you have to wait for me to start talking about a specific item. That item is all in front of you, and it should not necessarily be this big bait item that you can't touch. Please, by all means, get involved with those. We're going to talk about them, each category independently. But what's great is leave some of the cognac while we're talking about cognac to obviously taste against Armagnac when we get to that particular deal, so that you have really the great comparisons of France in all three categories. Not a lot of times do you end up obviously tasting these things against each other. It would have been really fun to add like Corbel or Christian Brothers into this, just to see how the American viticulture society has decided what brandy is in comparison to France. So we'll kick it off with just a little history of cognac in general, and I am not necessarily going to read off the screen because you guys, turns out, all passed kindergarten, so we don't need to cover that. Allegedly. However, we do have some pretty important things up here on this, which I will say, you know, the whole reason we started actually doing anything with cognac distillation is the fact that we wanted to preserve the wine. So we're wine growers, as we're about 30 minutes north of Bordeaux. That's kind of a big mystery to a lot of people. They think that we're nowhere near, but we're really, you know, kind of almost like a suburb of the great Bordeaux area. So with that, you look at the history of this, throwing all the way back to Martel in 1715 being one of the first houses to actually be officially up and running and producing cognac back in that time. Going through those, you see that obviously our friends at Hennessy we're a little behind. Turns out, don't worry, Drake and everyone else is catching up for that 40 to 50 years of lost time. Outside of that, we get down to the Courvoisier, the Royer, Mucau, Camus, and then the fine company that pays my mortgage, Hardy. We are going to touch on Hardy today. This is obviously going to stay a little bit more just brandy focused. It's hard for me when I get my bills paid by Hardy to not necessarily give them just a little bit of a leg up in this presentation. So with that being said, we got all of these houses up and running, and then this little bug called phylloxera came through and pretty much crushed all of France when it came to grape growing. So who won in that scenario? Anybody have any idea as to what gin? Okay, anybody else? American whiskey. American whiskey definitely, it certainly helped. Scotland would be the ones that actually would say that they made that spirit. They were drinking brandy and soda, or cognac and soda, and they easily switched into scotch and soda. Scotland was very smart to slide in at the appropriate time. But the same exact thing was, there was another region, turns out, that was growing apples that bug didn't necessarily do anything to. So Calvados had its greatest time in the sun. Turns out as soon as we started growing grapes again, Calvados went right back to being the absolute, you know, stepchild of the other two brandy regions. It does, whoever said it sucks is totally true. So if you want to advance one, we've got obviously our regions, which I think the most important piece here is that they weren't established until 1909. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, going back to phylloxera,
yes.
Can you talk briefly about the grape makeup pre-phylloxera versus...
Absolutely. So in the cognac region, every cognac that was produced at that time was 100% French Colombard. Okay, so that's significant because that particular grape varietal, after a bug comes and eats those grapes because it likes those grapes, it becomes one of those where no grower wants to put that grape back in the ground. Because not only was Cognac devastated, but Bordeaux was devastated, and Armagnac was devastated. Then all the way across the country, this little place called Champagne was devastated. Burgundy, you know, like, do you really want to be the guy who throws grapes in the ground and then has the entire country looking at you going, you wrecked it again? Like, did you learn nothing from the first time this happened? So the interesting part about this is that the whole country of France actually owes a huge debt to the United States because the rootstock came out of Denison, Texas, that was put in Cognac to make all of those vines resist phylloxera. So Denison, Texas, fun fact, is the sister city of Cognac, France. The other people, and you know the French hate pretty much crediting anybody with anything. They also would credit the fact that the Italians brought them the grape that we now use today in plentiful form, which is Rouge Blanc. Trebbiano in Italy, of course, we can't call it Trebbiano in France because then that would be giving the Italians credit for something. So it is a interchangeable name for that particular grape varietal, but Uni Blanc is today what you find as the most prominent grape varietal in the Cognac grapes. Little fun fact, it's going to sound like a commercial, but we still at Hardy have pre-phylloxera Cognac, which is referred to as Hardy Perfection. Now Hardy Perfection, there's about 30 decanters left in the world. It was released in 1979 as the only pre-phylloxera Cognac on the market. It was distilled in 1863. It was actually pulled out of wood in 1967 when we then put it into glass demijohn because ironically, the 5th generation of our company, Benedict Hardy, looked at all of her predecessors and said, you moronic men, why did you leave all of this stuff sitting in the corner in wood and watch it evaporate away? It sat there for 104 years. You started out with over 400 barrels, and you now are down to 60. Did you just want to watch great-grandpa's juice just completely go up into the sky? So we ended up removing that and putting that in glass demijohn, which just look like big glass vases, and that obviously holds that particular stuff without having any kind of evaporation. So, yes?
Sorry to go back to this. Would you mind, I'm assuming you've tasted, could you tell us a little about kind of the different in the distillate flavor profile between
absolutely.
Calvados versus Uni Blanc?
Sure, so the main distillate, obviously the reason Uni Blanc works for us today is because just like French Colombard, it is a very highly acidic grape. It turns out that wood took a lot more of the influence from Colombard, whereas Uni Blanc happens to have a much higher acid level, and it doesn't it doesn't let the wood impact it as nearly as much as French Colombard. So if you tasted, quite honestly, Perfection, you're going to notice a lot more of, oh God, I don't want to go all the way there, but it's almost more bourbon-esque in the fact that there is a sweetness from the wood that you get. Whereas when you get to the 50-year-old Cognac here today, you'll notice the wood has not in any way penetrated that. Like Uni Blanc, when selected correctly, and those casks are selected correctly, that can absolutely age for 100 years, and where the wood physically never overtakes it. Colombard, unfortunately, a little bit more finicky, is going to take on that wood, whether you're putting it in neutral oak for the last 60 years of its time. It's still somewhat resistant to being that, I like to say, Kendall Jackson Chardonnay situation of way too much wood and not enough of the wine. Okay? This particular thing, what I think is interesting, and if you take a couple things away from this, what I love is we all, and I work for a French company, so obviously there's some hoity-toityness involved in French brands. A lot of people don't necessarily know a lot about Cognac. Most of the time when you tell them it's brandy, people are like, what? Like, yeah, let's dumb this all down here. Let's make this very, very simple. However, when it comes to this, we keep evolving rules. Like Armagnac's a great example, as well as Cognac. We just changed a rule this past year, which you would think for a category that's been around for so long, the fact that they're still trying to improve upon what they have is remarkable. So for the fact that in 1909, prior to that, there was no Grand Champagne, Petit Champagne, Borderie, none of those regions actually existed until 1909. So when people are like, yes, I have a Grand Champagne that's over 140 years old, well, that is a big line of bullshit, because that actually didn't exist at that point. So you can't necessarily call it that. But we'll actually get to some labeling, but most of the easiest way, if you're wine fans, for you to be able to understand is if we all have to somewhat kind of Americanize some things. Grand Champagne is to the American consumer what Napa Valley would be when it comes to red wine. Petite Champagne is very much so like Sonoma. I use those two to say when when Napa Valley gets an amazing score, like 100-point wines, typically Sonoma tanks. It's, for whatever reason, that lovely valley, there's a yin and a yang to how those particular two areas do. When it comes to the Grand Champagne and the Petite Champagne region, same exact situation. So when one does really well, the other one typically has a little off year, and then vice versa. It's why so many houses want to work with those two regions specifically and have contracts with those regions, because that's where the best of the best comes from. The rest of those, the Borderie, the Finbois, the Blanc, all of those other areas, very simply, are like California's Central Coast. Okay, you're getting a lot of bulk juice from those particular areas that are going to, make some folks like Drake have something to say about. We would never be able to do, Hennessy would never be able to do Grand and Petite Champagne in their VS because there's just not enough grapes to do that. They work with 1,100 growers, to give you an idea of how many folks are involved in their production. We have 20 farmers, 20. We get to go out and actually look at the grapes and then decide if we want those or if we're going to pass or things like that. So different regions obviously sets us apart as one of the regions. Cognac production, pretty simple. Obviously only white wine, 90% of the grapes are Uni Blanc, the rest of them would be full blanche. There is a little bit of French Colombard because we've grown a set and decided to throw some back in the ground. But those are typically the three that are utilized. Full blanche ends up typically being, if you want to compare it to wine grapes, kind of like Cab Franc. It ends up adding a little bit of sweetness to the wine, so not a lot of people like to put it in because they're going to put caramel coloring in their product. And when they put caramel coloring in, you always got to walk that line of, hey, that's naturally going to add sweetness to it. So do you want the grape to be doing the driving the bus on that, or do you want the physical caramel coloring to do it? Double pot distillation in an alembic pot still is the key deal here because that's what separates Cognac from Armagnac. Armagnac is obviously a one-time distillation and Cognac is done twice. We obviously get the wine from those particular growers and all of the distillation has to be done by March 31st. That is a rule by the BNIC. And BNIC is the Bureau National of Cognac. And those are the folks that set the rules and they are the ones that we all, every time we go to work and put something in a bottle, they have to physically be involved and follow those rules. Yes?
So then when are the grapes picked exactly?
The grapes are picked between October and November, for instance, just like what we're having in the US these days. I mean, Tampa's the same all the time, right? I mean, if you talk to anybody up north, we're having like 50, 60 degree days in New York, which is a little off. Same situation. We still have grapes hanging right now that have not been picked, which is totally allowed. We're allowing sugar levels to come up because that obviously helps the distillation process. Yes.
Given your region, are you concerned about botrytis on the grapes prior to harvest?
It is always a concern. It's always a concern. We can physically manage that vineyard to vineyard. For instance, we can manage it with a lot of the products that we have. The product that you guys have in your VSOP glass today happens to be an organic VSOP cognac. So we can't control it in that one at all. So yes, it is a concern. Some of that fruit will end up just getting dropped altogether. Our farmers have been a little bit more cognizant of those situations to be able to get fans on, just like a lot of other regions do, to be able to get that rot away. Yes.
What's the purpose of that deadline on the distillation?
You know what? There are some rules. There are some rules like prohibition that nobody understands as to why they actually exist.
Why organic? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
Why organic?
Why organic? It was something as to the fact that right now it's set Hardy aside from the rest of the group, knowing that organic has started to become a billion-dollar industry in general. And there are a lot of people, and I would like to say that this room probably deals with this often, where you have somebody come up to the bar and ask for, what do you have that's gluten-free? And a lot of times you guys have to, pretty much everything, because that whole distillation process. I would like to agree with you on the fact that why organic? Because most of those pesticides, if you will, are going to go away in the distillation process. However, it is a great selling point, and the fine folks of Oregon Tilth love to come to France so that they can certify our organic. I've been there twice when they've come to do the certification, and it's fun. They come, we go to dinner, never once. I'm the guy who's pushing them to actually get to a vineyard to actually look at the grapes, because they're more interested in being like, well, when are we going to Paris? And when are we doing this? So there's a little bit of cash play in every game these days. But we are true to form. We have 23 vineyards that are completely certified organic, and about 3/4 of them are in Grand Champagne, and the other are
So the cognac's organic or made with organically grown grapes?
made with organically grown grapes. Okay. All right, aging of casks. Cognac is aged exclusively in oak. Obviously, most of this, anybody know why Limousine oak gets the name Limousine oak? The limousine forest, fantastic. No, it's not a 12-passenger vehicle. So that is the center of France. Everybody wants to know why limousine is such a unique deal. Well, it's kind of convenient. You do have those folks in Cognac and Bordeaux utilizing those grapes a lot for their wine production for sheer convenience. It's literally right there. When it comes to Gascony, we're talking about Armagnac, then they're obviously utilizing the particular oak in the south of France. So we use some big words to make things sound more expensive. More of it is actually based on convenience. Okay? Limousine oak is a lot tighter, and you are going to get a lot more consistent age factor through as well. Would you? Thank you.
Can I ask, I'm sorry.
Please.
We're asking 100 questions. Who's your
That's
keeper?
My Cooper. So we actually, we utilize 3 specific Coopers that are, I can get you names, I physically have been to them, but they are right now escaping my particular brain, that are all physically doing their production right outside the forestry area, and that's where we're picking up from. So those 3 end up handling everything that Hardy does because we use Limousine oak on everything. No. No.
What's all for it?
No. As to not waste everybody's time, let me.
Sorry.
Well, I'll get you.
Sorry.
I'll get you the email at the end that has that particular information. So, as far as the master blender, this is again one of those significant situations here where you've got winemakers in Napa, you have winemakers in Sonoma. This is our the greatest honor at a chateau is to be this particular master blender, because what your job is not only selecting these particular great eau de vies that come in, but then deciding which of them is going to actually be able to age up to 100 years or be able to age for much less, like the 2 years required for a VS. With that, he not only has this pressure, but if you want to advance the slide, he also has the fact that he's got somebody enjoys Hennessy VS, right? And you are going through millions upon millions of cases of that. You want to make sure that the consistency in that product is the same today as it is tomorrow. So that job is still 100% done by, a human palate, which we are, in a lot of these particular industries starting to get away from and starting to use way more chemistry to make sure that it's similar to what it was previously. Whereas Cognac, this is definitely a way to keep a job, is the fact that we are committed to making sure that we have a palate involved here that's going to approve that flavor going through. Each cognac is unique, obviously. There's a lot of things. We do things a little bit differently than others. Just to give you an example, outside of the fact that obviously you've got different grape aspects, you have different woods, you have different toast levels. I mean, this is all very much so the same situation when we're talking about bourbon. But when it comes down to cognac, we also do some things that are a little strange at Hardy, where we actually, on day 1 of distillation, we fill that barrel about 85% full with eau de vie, and we add water on day 1. Now, a lot of people think that's the dumbest thing on the planet Earth to do, because what you're doing is increasing evaporation. Water evaporates faster than alcohol, so why are you adding water to alcohol? Well, we want to age at a lower proof, because we think that the water spending time in that wood allows it to blend in a way that takes away the quote-unquote grain burn. I'm from Minnesota, so when my neighbors in Wisconsin guzzle down Corbel bottles. They're doing it to stay warm. Okay, it keeps the center of their core really, really, really toasty. However, when we're talking about the elegance that is involved in cognac, anything we can do to be able to make sure that the flavor is front note and the alcohol is somewhat the back note. Okay, I see a lot of undrank glasses. Please, by all means, get in there. The art of tasting cognac, the glass. This is kind of a signature that we pushed on. I will get to in just a second. That we pushed on in a huge, huge way. And we kind of won, which was great. All of the cognac houses were tired of the fact that somebody came out and said, the snifter is the glass for cognac. I would like to take every cognac glass that I receive that is a snifter and break it. Because if you take a snifter and you bring it to your nose, what happens? What do you smell immediately when you stick your nose in the snifter?
The burn.
The burn, right? So all the alcohol, wow, it's doing a great job of concentrating itself right there, waiting for your nose to come in and get hit with it. Now, the tulip glasses you have in front of you are actually what Maximilian Riedel actually said is now the official glass of cognac. Because the tulip glass allows the burn to dissipate, and it allows the flavors of cognac to come in. And just a side note, I don't work for Riedel, but if you ever have an opportunity to do a Riedel seminar, please, it is worth everything. However, with this, the snifter, ironically, we're still in that realm of trying to curtail this. This is one of those where you guys have an influence. Stick cognac in a white wine glass. Stick it in anything that's not a snifter to be able to actually really get that bouquet. Some people think, we still have to teach people, we still have to teach the American consumer that when they're drinking spirits or they're smelling spirits, open your mouth. This isn't wine where you're just using your nose. Open your mouth, because so many people end up obviously drinking spirits like they were taught how to drink wine, and unfortunately that's where we get a lot more of that burn. Open up your mouth, gets all the olfactory glands actually working to be able to get all the flavors in. Yes?
So, I'm sorry, going back to the prior slide, you were talking
Yep.
about aging. I'd love a comparative discussion. Obviously, I think a lot of the people in the room have been to bourbon,
Okay.
and you keep making that
Yep.
allegory. Actually, environments similar to Rick House and how you're aging them, temperature-wise, your evaporation rate, that kind of thing, as it affects the distillate.
Okay, so temp is way, way cooler than Bourbon County. I mean, Bourbon County does an amazing thing because they need, with that time period that they're working with, it's a shorter window, right? They've got to be able to extract all of that out. That's why I think I'll just say it's interesting. It's interesting when states, I'll just completely wreck mine. The great state of Minnesota trying to make bourbon right now. Here's why this is never going to work. Is because we don't actually crest 90 degrees for a long enough amount of time. And when you don't do that, the problem is you're not getting the extraction from the wood. So you look at Bourbon County and you obviously have what almost looks like molasses coming out of a barrel. And you've got, I was going to go vulgar with that thought process, but you just don't have any of that color that's there. Cognac requires longer age. So I'm going to further that answer, advance one more. We'll hit this one more time. So reading the cognac labels, okay, this is key because it'll kind of tie into that, okay? So VS used to be called 3-star, okay? And we've got some brandies out there today that still utilize the stars. Now, back in 1909 when the AOC situation went into play, we ditched stars in the world of French brandy. And we ended up going to the VS, VSOP, and XO thought process. Okay? Reason being that we started with stars is actually a really unique story in the fact that our cellar hands for all of these particular cognac houses, most of the time, they couldn't read or write. So when we would actually rack cognac and we would put it down in the cellar day one, they would go down and they would take a piece of chalk and they would draw a star on the end of it because that was year one. And then they would go record that. And then obviously based on the recordings, they would have to go and say, okay, we're gonna go redo all of them. So end of year one, we go down and we put another star on it. Obviously once it's 2 years old, we put a 3-star on it. You're picking up where this all gets to being 3 stars, 2 years old. That is our VS. Until folks in California started just pretty much putting 3-month brandy and calling it 5-star brandy, because there is no BNIC in the US, there's nobody governing brandy here. So you can do whatever you want, it's all marketing. And then we went, wait a second, California's got like an $8.99, brandy on the shelf, and then Cognac is sitting next to it as a 3-star, and it's $12. Like, this is all wrong. So what we did is we said, fine, California, you keep that, we're gonna go to VS and confuse all Americans, because now they have no idea what VS, VSOP, or XO means. It turns out we just came out with VS and VSOP to begin with. So those two designates, which were 2 years old and 4 years old. And again, God damn it, Hennessy goes and bitches to the BNIC and says, we've got all these really, really special cognacs, our parodies, that we want to market to Asia and to those fine folks in America. But we want a different level. So they went and said, okay, great. We will give you the XO level. Now, if you talk to anybody in America, this is a little confusing, but XO, typically we are trained to think that that means extra old, right? Because God knows Christian Brothers put that on their bottle, so that's why every one of us thinks that that's what that means. When really it's actually, they gave it to age unknown was the name translated in French. And when they did that it's really crazy, because it's called age unknown, but at the time it had to be 6 years old, okay? And this rule is the rule that changed in April of 2016, okay? So this is where I love this, in the fact that Cognac is not so proud that they go, you know what, this is ridiculous. Like 6 years old for what's supposed to be the greatest product coming out of our region? Maybe not. So what we did is we changed it to 10.
When did that go into effect?
April. Okay, so what I think is the greatest is 3 years ago in July, they called all the cognac houses and said, hey, we're gonna do something fun. When you guys go pick grapes this year, just so you know, if you want to do any XO, as of 2016, you can't release any of those unless they're 10 years old. Well, Hennessy, I think, physically got on the phone with every house immediately and called everybody and was like, do you have anything that you need to sell? Because we are in the market to buy as much 10-year-old cognac as possible. And if you've noticed, Hennessy's gone from about a $180 bottle of XO to about a $300 bottle of XO. Now that is not credited to Drake, that is completely credited to the fact that this law changed. Okay, so they ended up with less stock, and a little company called Party Cognac stopped selling juice to Hennessy that day. So they've been given one award in their time, which was a 92 award for their Hennessy Paradis, which was 100% juice that they purchased from us. Fiend. Anybody know what fiend means?
He paid it.
It's a term that evokes the quality, exclusivity, of wine grower or cider growing
That's
appellation.
nothing gets past this cat. Fiend actually is a translation in French to blend. Okay? So that particular word, yes, it averts that great quality, but when you see fiend, not fine, on a cognac label, and it says fiend cognac, and you know what that means?
Blended
A
cognac.
blend of cognacs.
A blend of cognacs from every cognac region, right? So it's like literally having California on a wine bottle, okay? Does that typically mean good things when you see a Pothic red and it says California? No, right?
It's an unfair enough.
Yes, somewhere in there, the lab that makes that product is in California, so that's fine. When it comes to Fiend Champagne, that is a blend of the Grand Champagne region and the Petit Champagne region. Next question, why are they called the Champagne region? Because I will tell you, I do so many staff trainings, and I always hate when the person is like, oh, I got another question, Hey, what grapes, do you guys use Pinot Meunier in your cognac? And then I'm like, see, this is us confusing you, because we call it a Champagne region, yet we don't grow the same grapes. No, so Pinot Meunier and Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, those are all grown in Champagne. The region that we have two areas that are called Grand Champagne and Petit Champagne is because the soil type is exactly the same. So the reason we get that name, or we utilize those names, is to pay homage to our East Coast brothers that have that particular, alluvial soil, if you will, when really it has nothing to do with those grapes.
Different elevation though, yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. But just sticking to that really chalky salt, or the chalky soil type is the key. Yes. Get it? Cognac aromatic wheel, gonna fly through this because there is some packets in the back from the BNIC. Justin, will you just pick one of those up and Vanna White it for me for a second? That lovely, that lovely item right there, if you guys want to grab one, it actually has this cognac flavor wheel in it, which very quickly, you got flavors of spring, summer, autumn, winter. Pretty much your VS qualities are going to have your spring flavors. Your VSOP qualities are going to have your summers. Your XOs are going to bring in autumn, and then anything that's aged, like, for instance, maybe, I don't know, if you had a 50-year-old to taste, you might actually look for things like cedarwood, coffee, other things of those winter flavors. So the BNIC, God bless them, does a great job on their education. Their website's probably the easiest thing to navigate around if you want to do any staff training within your own establishments. So good stuff. And inside this as well, just talking about the cocktail that's in front of you, the BNIC had a summit where they brought in bartenders from all over the world into Cognac, France. It's happening again next summer. However, what they did was they said, hey, look, we've got all these really great classic cocktails, but we don't have anything new. So the cocktail that you guys had is what was referred to as the Summit Cocktail. And our American representative who went to that lovely deal was a gentleman by the name of Dale Droff that actually participated. He's still working his way on getting into the circle of things that are new. No. Flip it. Armagnac, because
What's in the summer cocktail?
what's in the Summit Cocktail? Okay, so it is a little bit of the, I believe we use VSOP organic of the Hardy. That is some fresh ginger, lemonade, and that's it. And then it has the cucumber twist in the glass. Okay. We went.
American lemonade or British?
This particular version is American lemonade.
No, I don't believe so. I think they used English, so it's probably Sprite.
Boom!
I corrected that. That's how you consider.
Listen, I will own a mistake. Armagnac, Gascony, France. So we are down pretty much in the southwest corner of France where these, you ride bikes and you eat foie gras. So you have to do a lot of bike riding because otherwise you will die of a heart attack. So if you flip it, this is where foie gras was born because this is, if you are into gastro, like any of that stuff, you love to eat. I tell you what, if you want to die a really happy life or happy death, Gascony is absolutely where you need to be. If you flip it one more, what we love about Armagnac is that it pretty much likes to bitch slap Cognac and the fact that it's 150 years older on record, and they are not afraid to remind them of that every single time. So with this, obviously, they encountered the same exact, we've got great history with it, but it also encountered obviously the same phylloxera situation that everybody else did. You can, there you go, thank you. So, well, stop drinking. Key dates, 1909, you notice how pretty much Cognac and the fine folks Armagnac got together. It was the same situation. 1909, we designated AOCs in Cognac, we did the same exact thing in Armagnac, okay? They are friendly, but Armagnac has always got looser rules. So they're a lot more fun to party with than Cognac, okay? Again, one of those great regions of when you use good comparisons, like Cognac France is like Napa, stuffy, rules, no concerts, you can't get married if you're not, part of the family of the wine owner. Same situation in Cognac. When it comes to Armagnac, they have literal F1 tracks that go through the grape growing regions. And you have guys that just got done barrel sampling and then getting into an F1 car and driving around and being like, hey, Allison, would you like to come on a quick ride? I just got done racking about 100 barrels and I'm hammered, but let's go 150 miles an hour, it'll be fun. The Armagnac appellation, obviously splits itself into 3 different production regions. Bas Armagnac is probably the one that is most notable to all of you because it is the best of those 3 regions. Okay? We don't obviously have so many choices of Armagnac in the great country of the United States. So the other 2 are actually very, very, very hard to come by. Okay? Which I know typically makes that more interesting to everyone in this room. However, Bas Armagnac is enough of a uniqueness. In '05, we decided to actually designate that you could come out with white Armagnac. So La Blanche is a clear brandy, unaged, that was now available and was by law able to be done. You can flip the lovely next slide, please. Okay. So here's, if you're not familiar with France, there's the whole country. And looking at how far apart all of these particular regions are. When we're talking about Cognac and the fact that it's a really, really short drive to obviously hit Bordeaux and then another short drive. We always, pretty much on any of our trips that we send folks like yourselves, what we do is we end up going to Cognac, and you wake up in the morning in Cognac, you get in a car and you go have lunch in Bordeaux, and then when we all get back in the car, we drive on down and go have dinner in Gascony. It's actually very, very convenient with some drinking along the way. Calvados obviously being where we're way up on the north, on the beaches of Normandy. That region we will get to in just a second. But if you look here, obviously, here are your 3 regions within Armagnac, where Bas Armagnac ends up again. It's typically going to be seen as somewhat the best quality. It is obviously one of the smallest when it comes to physical plantable acres as well. And I think I might have just covered all of that already. There you go. All right, so here's your 4 grape varietals that happen to roll in Armagnac. Baco Blanc would be the only one that we haven't talked about yet. And Baco is the one main distinctive. This isn't like, hey, they put like 3% of this in Armagnac. This is actually a significant amount that is involved here. They like Uni Blanc down there, but I will tell you, they love to just drink Uni Blanc by itself. Like the old-fashioned way of still wine, where you just drank it and you didn't distill it. So most of the Uni Blanc that they actually grow and produce, they drink as still wines in the south of France. So it's really, based on its high acid, it goes really well with really, really heavy foie gras. A little bit of interest, and I see a lot of people taking pictures. If you give me any contact information, I'm happy to send you this lovely thing after. And we'll zip it because it's a touch big. You can flip it one more.
But I won't be able to switch to slides.
No, you won't.
Actually, so you're really serious, just small pictures of you.
Such a small, tight community down here. I love it. So here's your Armagnac still. There's not a whole lot of uniqueness in this particular situation, but for those of you who are, this is a single situation. So the Cognac still looks very simple, or very similar. However, obviously we do it twice. So there's that. You can hit it. Aging in barrels. Now here's a key deal here, because I think a lot of you, when it comes to bourbon, are always, we've all seen a bourbon barrel, because it turns out everyone in America, I think every bar has bought a barrel of something at this point now. So then when they say, hey, can we get a barrel of Cognac, or can we get a barrel of Armagnac? You say, sure. So Maker's Mark, it's 30 cases, right? Well, this one's more like 110. So if you can sell 110 cases of Cognac or Armagnac, we have a barrel program for you. However, this is a good example. I love this picture because of the fact that it shows how much larger those particular Armagnac barrels
He's not
are.
on the floor.
No, he's standing and yeah,
He's hanging.
he's hanging now. Okay, so the Gascon oak is what was mostly used. I would say Limousine is maybe like the smallest touch, maybe 10% of that particular wood is used. New oak for 6 months to 2 years, and if you hit that slide one more time, I think we actually come up to our aging rules. For those of you who want to know what a glass demijohn looks like that we talked about with Cognac, those lovely, let me tell you how safe it is to have something like that be in a cellar And then these people pretty much just roll around and I like to say that everyone pretty much drinks through the cellar. So the amount of times that I have seen those where when this says 1900 on it, it's not the price, that's the year. And these things constantly get broken, which is really sad because it is like nothing. It's like nothing. Like, can somebody go get the mop bucket? You gotta take care of 1900, that's just broke over here. It's a little crazy because you think maybe we'd find a different way to store them. I don't know. This wicker protection that's around it right there, well, that will do the trick. That for sure will do the trick. Yes.
Is that just cloth and stuff that's in?
That is 100% cheesecloth in the top. Yeah. When it comes to corks and bungs and all of that situation in those, I don't want to gross anybody out when it comes to Cognac or Armagnac, but I'm sure this happens in Bourbon County as well. When these guys are literally just like rolling down and they'll like literally take it out and be like, well, I wonder what this tastes like today, and they will just stick 2 fingers in it and then lick their fingers. And then about 2 more barrels down, they take that one out and they're like, stick it in. And I'm like, hey, that's gross. And he's like, John, it's 130 proof. You're fine. Nothing is actually gonna, it's fine. I'm like, you know what, just do that without me around, actually.
So going back to distillation of Armagnac, as it is a single distillation, that's not the only difference I notice in the tasting and in talking with Armagnac people.
If you give me 1 minute, I have a whole slide of what's different between Armagnac and Cognac.
I was going to say there's a lot more heads and tails that are left within the Armagnac distillate.
Okay. Okay. I would say I get a lot of people that say that there's a much more rounder mouthfeel based on that. You know, though you're in a double distillation, you're obviously removing much more of those fatty acids and you know, for lack of a better word, complexity. Everybody's got a different palate, so head and tails. You might.
To be fair, it's not just the palate. I'm talking to Armagnac producers, their cuts are jankier, might be the next word.
That's refined.
That is refined.
That might be the-
What's interesting, again, and this is all very much so, this is very subjective, okay? Because I will tell you that I typically, as a guy who gets paid originally by Cognac and then secondarily by Armagnac, I'm always afraid to put Armagnac in a tasting because I will tell you it's always gonna go 50-50. 50% of the room is gonna say, I like Armagnac way better than I like Cognac, and vice versa. Most of the time, it actually is jankier towards Armagnac, where I end up with.
It wasn't a question, it's a comment on
Yeah,
the flavor profile largely comes from that extended heart.
Sure.
In talking to distillers, both in Armagnac and abroad, it is clear, at least to me, that more of the heads and tails are left in for flavor.
I would not disagree with that statement. Their cutting level is definitely far less. So, when it comes to requirements of age on Armagnac, we are just a solid 1 year, which is another thing that is going to taste jankier, is the fact that we are less aged on these guys than we are in Cognac. The other thing that you should just be in the know on, and when tasting Hardy next to these, is that our VSOP is 8 years old, because we don't have caramel color. Our XO is 20 years old, even though it only needs to be 10 instead. So right now, when you're tasting them against each other, you've got a huge window of age space that's involved. VSOP only needs to be 2, XO needs to be 4. They are not changing that rule. This is the one time that Cognac really kind of made a major change, and Armagnac said, pretty much go screw yourself, like we're not doing it. The other thing that's interesting about Armagnac in comparison to Cognac is the fact that vintages are allowed. So you will find bottles, for instance, when we do some Armagnac cocktail competitions, the prize is physically your birth year. So we get a bottle of your birth year, and you get to taste a vintage of Armagnac from the year you were born. It always helps to be older in this situation. I literally am the guy that's like in the back when the judges announce, and I'm like, oh my God, she's 22. This is perfect. It's so cheap. It's a great designate on that. You can hit it one more time. All right, so here's the slide that obviously does a lot of the differences, okay, which we covered most of them, but 150 years older. The climate, obviously, because it's on the south end, is going to be far more warmer and sunny, and we do not have that ocean influence at all, kind of cooling down the area at night. Uses the single distillation, obviously different wood, vintages are allowed, they are not allowed in cognac, it always has to be a blend, is often a better value, which is completely true. So when we're talking about cocktails, Armagnac is a great idea based on the fact that you do always have typically better value. We only sell 6.7 million bottles versus 160 million bottles of cognac. The key piece here, though, I think is the last slide, okay? We only export 40%, cognac exports 94%. You go to cognac and drink cognac, you're like, they look at you like, really? Like, you're gonna drink cognac? Oh, okay, all right, great. We drink Pinot de Chiron, which is fortified cognac. That's about as close to cognac as they get. They just say, oh no, we ship that stuff out. Like, we sell that to, you know, Asia and America. Like, we will hold it up in high regard that we clearly have, you know, tax money from it, but it's not something that's their favorite item to drink. Calvados. This is real quick because I realize I'm over on time.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. The unique part to this, there's far less slides when it comes to Calvados. When we get to this, just to give you an idea, flip back. This does not. This does. Flip
You know, he does this other way. Boom,
Just give me 1 second. This is just to give you some of the grape or the apple varietals, which I'm sorry when I stretch the picture and grab all of them. And most people want to ask the question, what's the predominant apple that they use? There's over 140 different types, and it all is up to the specific house. So there is nothing. They're all approved. I love this. When it comes to when it comes to Armagnac and Cognac, they've got real specific rules. And you get to these guys and they're like, I don't know, did it grow on a tree? Did you take the worm out of it? Perfect. There's over 140 apple choices that you can utilize within this to be able to make Calvados. The other part to this is that there can be another fruit added to Calvados.
Pears.
Good job. So pears can be 30% of that particular mix and still be quote-unquote Calvados. Now, there you go. All right.
There are apples that you can't use then.
There are some. There are
Like they
some.
have a list of like non.
It would probably be easier to give you that, yes, as to like, hey, no on these. But yes, there is a physical list.
There's a specific do not use.
There is a do not use list, and there is
Anything
a
you'll find at the grocery store.
Yeah.
Is it doing?
So when and ironically, the pears, it's jankier with the pears because I'm 100% stealing that word and using it nationwide. The pear qualities are a little. There's not as many guardrails involved in that. But very simply, like for instance, the Calvados that you guys have in your glass right here, which is the Armagnac VSOP, that particular guy happens to be a Pédoage. So that is very simple here. We don't have lots of pictures because there was enough pictures given to you. We've got a alembic still that can be